Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Investpol podcast. Today's guest is Liz Frazier. Liz is recognized for her dedication to promoting financial literacy, including through her Beyond Piggy Banks and Lemonade Stands book. She's also a strategic advisor to Copper Bank, a digital bank for teens. And outside of all of that, Liz is also a fee-based financial planner recognized by Investopedia with Frazier Financial Consultants. Liz, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I think you have a very interesting background, and maybe a natural starting place could be just talking about that, how you got into the financial planning space. I know you got into it after your first child, so curious to hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so funny enough, my mother is a financial planner. She opened up her business in the 80s and it was fee only financial planning. And, I kind of just saw it. I was young and I just saw it as like, what most young people do right now, just like numbers and kind of boring and confusing. And I really wasn't that interested in it. And then when I had my first child, who's now 10, I really, when I got pregnant, I just immediately went into this mode of, I need to have a budget. What if I want to? I started thinking about my goals. What if I want to, take some time off work to stay with her? What about childcare? How much is that going to cost? Oh my gosh, we need wills. We need to have life insurance. And I just went into this real planning mode about protecting my family and, making sure that we had enough resources and everything like that. And it just smacked me in the face that this was financial planning. And I almost immediately realized that this is exactly what I wanted to do. I always wanted to do something that was kind of helping people and giving advice and helping kind of figure out the best path for them. It really was very clear to me that financial planning is all about taking care of the people that you love and making a plan for the future, and reaching your goals. So I left my job at Forbes. I got my CFP, and ever since then, I've been a financial planner.
That's very interesting. And with that, do you find that's a common theme now in our world, where there's a lot of new parents who like get, I'll call it that panic on how do I'm bringing this new life into the world. I have to prepare them for the future.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I mean, I think before, and this is generalizing, but for me, before I had kids, I was just taking care of myself. So I was like, well, I'm fine. I can live off of peanut butter for a day. It's not, I'm just taking care of myself. I know I'm going to be fine. I'm not really that worried about anything. And then, yeah, all of a sudden you have this unit that you're responsible for. And it really does change things. And what I see a lot with my financial planning is families, young families, either couples who are thinking about having a baby or have just had a baby or just getting married, and they know that they need to be doing something. All of a sudden they're like, I know that I need a plan. I know I need to think about my finances. I think I need to be saving for retirement. I'm pretty sure I need to be investing. Maybe I need life insurance, but they know enough to know that they probably need some help. And so they come to me and they're like, I just want to make sure I have a plan. And I'm making money and I'm saving money and I'm doing all of these things that I think are right, but I'm just not sure I'm doing it in the right way or the right order. And I want to have a strategy. So I do think that parents really do kind of get that feel of, okay, now it's time for me to get a strategy in place.
And I chat with a lot of people in the space now, and I had an interesting conversation recently with one individual who was mentioning to me. He's like, I don't think it's a problem now of necessarily people being advantaged or disadvantaged to like the nth degree as once was in the U.S. historically. Now it's much more focused in my opinion, was much more focused in on introducing it into the households, where like the big disadvantages come into play now, on how people talk about finances at the dinner table. And if you grow up in a household where that's never discussed, that compounds later in life versus, I was blessed. My dad talked a lot about his investing and the stock market and all of his losses. And initially it actually scared me quite a bit. I was like, I don't want to invest at all. And I've taken a complete 180 approach to that. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. If, the role that just even socializing finances with your kids early on plays.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think you and I probably are outside the norm with that because I grew up with a financial planner and she came into
Yeah.
our class when I was in the third grade and played a stock market game. So we did talk about it and I had a lot of exposure to it. But the norm is that, when we were growing up, and I think still today, it's kind of seems rude to talk about money, and also I think parents don't want to stress their kids out about talking about money. It feels because finances are stressful for us. So it just feels like we're talking about something that's stressful rather than talking about something that's really important for them to understand as they get older. So I do think that's a really, really big difference. I'm seeing it more and more that families are understanding that this is just yet another thing that we need to expose our kids to. It doesn't have to be like a sit down PowerPoint of money and investing, but just something that we start talking about just naturally, like we talk about, incorporating vegetables and
Yeah.
different types of food groups at the table, and I don't sit there and I have a PowerPoint and a big discussion about broccoli, but I just throughout the day I'm like, oh yeah, make sure you get that vegetable, or I haven't eaten enough vegetables today, or and it's the same thing with money. I try to talk to my kids about like, oh, I'd really love that jacket, but you know what, we're getting ready to go to the beach and I'd rather save my money for that. And so it just is incorporating it and getting kids exposed at a young age. And that makes a big difference because the clients that I see, I have a lot of clients who are very intelligent and, experts in their fields. And they come and they say, I just feel so dumb when it comes to money. And I always tell them, well, why would you know anything about money? Who taught you? Nobody
Hmm.
taught you anything. Why would you know anything? So it's not just not understanding it, but feeling so uncomfortable around it. And I think that's a big disadvantage when we're not taught when we're young.
And is that where your book comes into play on helping, bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I wrote this book, and it's really meant for parents who don't have time to teach their kids about finance. We have so much on our plate. I didn't want to add another thing that you have to do with your kids. So I wanted to write a book that made it very easy for parents to just start incorporating finance into their day-to-day lives. Because, you know, what I realized is that when kids hit age 18, you know, really everything is affected by finance and money management, whether it's travel or retirement or buying a new house or whether you get a roommate or having kids, going out to dinner. Everything is directly related to your ability to make financial decisions. But nobody ever teaches this at a young age. So you hit 18. I mean, it's like taking an 18-year-old and throwing them in the ocean if they've never had swimming lessons.
Right.
So they hit 18 and they have no idea what they're supposed to do. So I wrote this book because at a very young age, you can start just incorporating really basic lessons around the fundamentals of finance. And that's something that as they get older, okay, so they're comfortable with this part of it. Then as they get older, you can build on that and then continue building until they get to the point where they're have the ability and confidence to understand important investing concepts.
We had a guest on before. I've actually brought it up a couple times, which I think he raised a very interesting point on how young people treat money like monopoly money now, where it's so accessible, right? Like it's just on your phone. There's no tangible effect anymore of like receiving $20 allowance from your parents or like mowing your neighbor's lawn and like having the physical cash in your hand and the emotional uh the emotion that it elicits when you have to hand that money over to someone else to pay for something versus now like I just go and tap my phone and I don't think twice about it. Do you think there's a like an epidemic now of how young people are treating their finances and becoming numb to the effect of their spending?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I don't think we'll ever be a cashless society, but we're definitely getting closer and closer to that. But I do think that they don't really see the value in money because it's just a card, it's just a number on their app. That's why I think that it's important at a young age to start with tangible money when you're teaching kids about finance, even at an older age, even as a teenager. I think that there's some value in, I have my kids when they go to the store. I started this when they're 4. When we go into the store, I'd give them the $5 for the coffee. They'd go up, they'd pay the $5, they'd get the change, just so that they understand that this is a barter system. We are
Yeah.
giving them something and they're giving us something back. And I think that as kids get older, the allowance system is a really great way for them to understand that they have a finite amount of money. even if it is within an app and they have a certain amount of savings in there, that they can see that that money is going down. And at a certain point, it's going to be at zero, and then they can't buy anything else and they have to earn more money to be able to buy it. So I think that it's important for teenagers to have direct experience, and be able to kind of play with their own money, whether it's digital or tangible. But as long as they have access to their own money to be able to start practicing money management, that's what's important.
So you mentioned one tip was the allowance feature. Is there any other tips that parents can deploy quite easily with their children?
Yeah, I mean, I think for kids, it's giving them, and I mentioned this before, I really think it's giving them the freedom to kind of play with money and make decisions. So, something I think a lot about is like taking your kids shopping and saying, here's $20. Or, a better example might be if you go to the local carnival or something like that. And your kids obviously are going to want to buy everything there. And you could say at the beginning of the day, I'm going to give you $20 and you can choose what you want to use this $20 for. And it's really hard for parents to let your kids buy a piece of junk, but it's important for them. So, give them the $20 and the first thing they see, they're going to want to buy. And you say, okay, well, let's walk through this decision. Why do you want to buy this? Here are some options. You could buy this now. You could save your $20 and walk around, see if there's anything more that you want to buy or something different. Or you could save it and get that telescope you really wanted to get on Amazon, whatever the situation is. But ultimately, help them walk through the decision, help them understand why they're making this decision, help them understand that this is a decision, that they are making a decision. And that means they're not getting something else if they're getting this piece of junk that is at the, skee ball stand. And then, once they get it, and if it becomes a disappointment or if it was a mistake, just walk them through it and say, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry that broke. Why do you think that broke? And, what do you think maybe you should do next time? But I think the biggest thing parents can do is let their kids have access to money, exposure to money, play with it, and make mistakes.
And then when they come to you asking for more, you have to be very rigid and tell them no, you have to wait till next week.
Yeah, that's another podcast. That is not that's a tough one to do.
That's funny. Is that the role that Copper Bank tries to play in young people's life? I know you advise the CEO there.
Yeah, so Copper Bank, the reason I joined it is because they really have the same mission that I do. There's a lot of banking apps out there, but this one wants to raise the first generation of financially literate adults, and that's their mission. And I really loved that because they want to incorporate education into everything that teens do. We don't want to tell them what to do. We want to explain to them why they're doing it. So Copper gives teenagers just direct access to experience money, to save for goals, to budget, and also to invest, which is huge at the teenage level. Because we've created funds for them based on their risk tolerance, and they can put part of their money towards investments. And the investments, we break it out so they can see what's actually in these investments. So it's not just this kind of mythical concept. It's, I bought a piece of Apple and Microsoft and Disney and Nike, and they can watch their money grow. They can, kind of get some basic understanding of why stocks go up and down. Mm-hmm. And it's just a great tool for teenagers to start really learning through experience with money.
Is it primarily geared towards that child or for the parent to equip their child with that?
That's a great question. And we really work on both because we know that this is a direct relationship. We need the parents to be involved also. And we want to make sure that we're providing the parents with resources because really most adults don't necessarily feel comfortable with finance. So we want to give both the teenager and the adult the tools to understand finance, to feel confident with their financial decisions, and ultimately make better decisions in the future.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. So, let's say you're 16 to 20. You didn't grow up in a household that talked a lot about finances. What's something that a young individual could start preparing for to equip them for that, that retirement picture, to start putting money away, to start thinking about how they can save for their goals?
So, what teenagers have that none of us have, and young adults, in their early 20s that none of the rest of us has, is time. And that is the most important thing. And I don't think they can fully realize how powerful time is when it comes to saving money. Because if they start saving or investing right now, they can earn compound interest. And compound interest is just, if you've got an interest rate of, say, just 5%, which is a savings account right now. If you've got an interest rate of 5% on $100, okay, in a year, you'll have $105. But the next year, you're going to be earning 5% on that $105. And then the next year, you're going to be earning interest on that. So compound interest is every year you earn interest on your interest. So it might not seem like a lot if you're starting with $5, but 40 years down the road, that is a huge amount of savings. So I think the best thing that teens can do right now is just to start saving. And I don't think they need to worry so much about exactly where and how they're saving. Getting into the habit of saving, every time you make something, pay yourself first. So put away, and it doesn't have to be, people say 20%, that's great. But if they could put anything away right now, it just gets them the habit of every time they earn, they're like, oh yeah, so automatically, 10% goes into an account where I'm saving. And that's just saving for my future, whether it's retirement, whether it's buying a car at some point or a house, it just gets them into that habit. And then, when you're in your early 20s and you're starting a first job, lots of employers offer retirement plans like 401ks. And if that's the first place, if you're going to start saving at an early age, the first place you should look at is if your employer has a 401k plan, because oftentimes they'll match it, your contribution, which means that they're just giving you extra money, and they will help you invest it. And then you just don't touch it. And leaving it there again for 40 years, I mean, that is really an incredible way to earn money.
Yeah, it's the eighth wonder of the world, as some put it, right? Compound interest.
Yeah, it is.
What's your opinion on credit cards and introducing that at a young age? Because, the 20% savings, you can start getting in the habit of, oh, I know I'm getting a paycheck from, my part-time job, whatever, in a few weeks. I'm going to buy this widgets, my new iPhone now. And you start getting into the habit of spending more than you're making. Do you think credit cards are good, bad, or it's something to wait for, as you mature?
I mean, I can't say credit cards are good or bad. It's all about how you use them. So there is a lot of value in credit cards for a couple reasons. One, if you can get a joint card with your teen, and this doesn't have to be like a big credit card. This can be, like a department store credit card for $500. But if you can get it in you and your child's name, that helps them start building credit. And that's going to be really important as they get older. And that's something that just kids don't think about because we don't talk about it. But that's something that's going to be really important as they get older, once they want to start getting money loaned and things like that for a house and things like that. So getting a credit card at a young age can be really valuable for that reason, but it's got to be done with the parent, and it's got to have a very low amount available, and you have to pay it off on time and every month. And that's the way that you can build credit. Of course, the problems with credit cards is that most people use it and they're like, oh, I can use my credit card. That's not real money, and I can afford everything that I want. And they don't pay it back on time. And so to use a credit card, it can be a valuable resource, but you have to know yourself. You have to know if you're disciplined enough to pay it off every single month. If not, you're just paying money to use it. So I think when it comes to a credit card, you have to have the knowledge that you're borrowing money. If you're using a credit card, it means you cannot afford this. And, you have to know that, oh, I'll be able to afford this next month and I'll be able to pay for it then. But you have to have that in mind when you use a credit card. And it can be really good for emergencies. But again, as long as you're disciplined with that, which I think credit cards just by nature make it hard to do.
Oh, I used to be in the habit of paying it off religiously. And then you get the lifestyle creep where you start, it goes from buying lunches to like buying trips or like buying expensive things. The next thing you know, you're like, crap, like I overextended myself. I need to dial this back. But then you just get into that debt cycle. Like I could see how easy it is for people to get in those debt cycles where you think your lifestyle has crept up more than your income has. So I actually, down that note, what role do you think lifestyle creep plays? Like, as a young individual, you go from a part-time job, let's say like you're at McDonald's, to like your first career. Should you start spending as much as you're making, or do should you put a little bit of a check and balance into place where if you can continue surviving off of the income you essentially were earning on that part-time salary, you're banking all of that extra savings?
Well, I think that would be the ideal world, right? When we make more money, we just stick to what we were making before that. We don't spend anything more. But the reality is, we make money. We work really hard to make money. So we want to be able to enjoy that money. We work and get promotions and get better jobs so that we can get the nicer house that we want, so that we can reach our travel goals, whatever that is. So just naturally, our budget and our expenses are going to increase as our income increases. But I think that try to always save maybe the same type of percentage of what you're making. So, if you're working one job and okay, I'm able to put 5 to 10% away. Well, if you get another job and you're making more money, you can spend more money, but just try to keep putting away 5 to 10% of that paycheck. So it'll still give you more room to play and more, you want to feel like you're being rewarded for your work. I think that that's really important. So if you get a promotion, it's okay to add in that, trip once a year, or it's okay, it's like a diet. You don't want to just live on like kale and quinoa because that's just not going to work. You've got to be able to reward yourself and enjoy it and splurge a little bit, but just be aware of continuing to save kind of the same rate that you were.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And, maybe as a final question, I know you are a financial planner, you deal with people's finances for a living. What, in your opinion, is the new generation looking for that financial advisors aren't necessarily servicing or aware of yet?
I think that the biggest thing I've seen with the younger generation is that they want to be partners with their financial planner and they want to be educated. It's really important for them because there's so much information out there now that we didn't have growing up on every subject. So they're aware of what they don't know. And so they want to be educated. They want to understand the reasons why they're investing in something. They want to understand the reason why they need to save this much for retirement. So I think historically, advisors tend to just give financial advice. And because we don't know very much about finance, we're just like, okay, this is what we do. But this generation has just so much more knowledge and exposure to everything. So they want to understand the rationale behind recommendations, and they want to partner with their advisor. They want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. And so it's really important as an advisor to get to what are their goals and priorities. And like I said, if they're a young family, they know they want to be doing something. They want to be responsible for their family and do the right thing, but they probably need some help figuring out what their goals and priorities are. So that's another thing that planners can do with this younger generation, is really help them to prioritize and to figure out, okay, well, what do you want to do in the next 3 years? What about 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 20 years?
It's funny. I was out for a drink with an advisor last night actually, and he was saying exactly the same point you did. On the investment side though, he was saying, it went from I'm putting you into a balanced fund and explaining that to now the client saying, I want you to put me in this S&P 500 ETF rather than this S&P 500 ETF because of the MER behind it. And the questions, the knowledge is to the nth degree now, where I could see how much more of a time suck it is on the advisor to explain all of that. But at the same time, to your point, building up that partnership approach on, I do have your best interest in mind, and it is my duty to also educate you on why I made these choices. I'm not just dumping you into something and forgetting.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because when, it does take a lot of time to explain these things. And for the short term, you do feel like, oh gosh, this is, a lot of information that they need. But that's how you build these long-term relationships. You know, they want to trust you. They want to feel like you understand them. They're being heard and respected, and it's a partnership. And they do have valuable knowledge that we did not when we were growing up. So I think that that's important for the long term. And that's what keeps, clients coming back and having these relationships with you.
Very interesting. Yeah, Liz, I think you have a ton of experience in this space, and it's very interesting to hear your thoughts on it. Do you have another book coming out at all in the future?
I'm working on it. Yeah, it's about halfway done, and it's really going to be for people who just need to get on track with finance, whether they're just getting started or maybe they're late to the game and they want to start getting on track for finance. So it's going to be just the absolute basics, as simple as it comes, and just make it easy for people to get financially healthy. So
Okay,
that's in
well,
the works.
I'm looking forward to it. Where, but before that gets launched, if there's anyone listening to this, where's the best place they can find you?
They can find me and they can reach out directly to me, set up financial planning, buy my book, anything they want to do and get resources on financial planning at lizfrazier.com.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, we'll leave a link in the show notes to that as well. All right, Liz, I really appreciate having you on. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to it.